Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for rewatching the CERLL Research Circle. My name is Lisa Lakna, and together with my colleague Aisha Adebayo, we are working for CERLL, the Center for Educational Research on Languages and Literacies here at OISE, under our current acting head with Professor Marie Paul Laurie. So the actual introductions of our two speakers got cut off at the actual event. So I'm re-recording their introductions, and then you will be able to rewatch the actual presentation, which is entitled, as you can see here, Exploring the Potential of Artificial Intelligence for Text Analysis in the Context of Language Learning. And our speakers today are Professor Dr. Eliseo Reategui, who is joining us here at OISE from the Faculty of Education at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. He received his PhD degree from the University of London in 1997 in the field of artificial intelligence, and he is an associate editor of IEEE, Transactions on Learning Technologies, and his research interests are mainly focused on the uses of artificial intelligence for text analysis in educational context. And he's joined by visiting doctoral student Ping Hu, who has helped to support and facilitate this workshop today. And Ping Hu is a PhD candidate at the Department of Applied Linguistics at the China Center for Language Planning and Policy Studies at the Shanghai International Studies University. And we are very grateful that you both agreed to have this presentation and then the workshop for us. A note for all visitors, you will be able to rewatch the presentation for the workshop. We did not record that section. Thank you again, and over to you.
And the question we have when we start speaking about artificial intelligence in education, and here specifically in language learning, the question we have is, how can AI be used to support language learning? And if we have a look in the literature, we're going to see that artificial intelligence will appear as a potential to help in personalized learning, in language practicing, vocabulary building, adaptive content creation, and automated assessment, which for us is really connected to the topic of this workshop, as we're going to speak about AI in text analysis. So the world has been taken by artificial intelligence. We hear about it all the time with the advent of ChatGPT, Gemini, and these kind of tools, large language models. I'm going to refer to these tools mostly as large language models, especially because usually people speak about artificial intelligence nowadays, but they actually mean ChatGPT, they mean large language models. But in fact, we have different types of large language models here, or different tools. ChatGPT, Gemini, or Llama 3. Maybe you don't know this one, it's not so well known. But it's interesting to try to put these tools in context of artificial intelligence. Well, first of all, they are these class of systems called large language models. But if we have a look at the branches of artificial intelligence, we will see that artificial intelligence has lots of ramifications. From left to right, I'll take the big ones. Artificial intelligence has been used in tasks for perceiving and acting in computer vision, natural language processing, robotics, and then machine learning, supervised or unsupervised learning, reinforcement, and so on. Automated reasoning, knowledge representation, problem solving. I'm not going to go into detail here, but we don't even see large language models here. So I'm going to put them here. And the question is, how does this class of system communicate with the rest? Because we speak about artificial intelligence as if it were a large language model, but in fact, large language models interact mostly with the area of artificial intelligence that is called natural language processing, but also machine learning. So it's interesting for us to have this understanding of what is artificial intelligence, which is this broad field of study in which we can find large language models interacting mostly with these two areas. So I just took natural language processing and let's talk a little bit about it. In terms of systems, what are the systems that we can find that work with natural language processing? Here I put just a few. There is the natural language toolkit that is in Python. It's a set of functions that can be used. Cometrics, core natural language processing from Stanford. There are many other tools, but here just a few to give you an idea of things that can be used to work in this field. Cometrics is certainly the most well-known of these tools, and we will speak more about it and what it does. Well, on the side of the large language models, we have these tools that we have, that I already mentioned before, ChatGPT, Gemini, Llama 3. But we will start, I will start here on the left side, the natural language processing. And first of all, I'm going to bring you an article by a few authors that are very well known. Gracer McNamara, Daniela McNamara, she's a really known researcher in this field. And this is an old article, 2011, but I thought it was interesting to bring it here because historically, this is the time when cometrics was being developed and used and researched. So there are many interesting points here about the use of natural language processing in text analysis, as we see here. So, first of all, what they say in this article is that text analysis can be used to help, text analysis can help select texts for students, which means that we can run this computer program that can tell us if a text is more complex or is less complex, if it can be used, if its level of use is academic or maybe, I don't know, K-12 or something like this. And they consider 5 factors to define these grade levels. And these factors are narrativity, syntactic simplicity, word concreteness, referential cohesion, and causal cohesion. Okay, this is a lot of things, but we're going to have a look at each of them. So let's have a look at narrativity, what they speak about it. Okay, first of all, narrative texts are usually simpler to understand as opposed to information texts. This is just a fact because of the structure of the text, the style of writing, the kind of knowledge that you need to have already to interpret informational texts are usually more difficult. So what happens here? I'm going to first give you just a couple of examples. I'm going to let you read this and then I'll comment. This is a narrative text first. Okay, and now I'll move to an informational text. Well, I believe that reading these two texts, you can have a little grasp of how easy or how difficult each of them are. And perhaps you will agree with me that the first one is a bit more easy to understand. It's a bit easier to understand. And for us here, what's interesting to see is that there are computer programs that can help us identify whether a text is more narrative-like or informational-like. So this is something that they speak about in this paper when they present co-metrics. The second category we were speaking about is syntactic simplicity. And what it is simple syntax makes a text easier to read. Okay, this seems to be a little bit obvious, but just to give you an example here again, here there is a question from an American community survey that was done in 1999, and this question was considered to be, in fact, very difficult. People had a hard time to answer it, and I'll let you read it quickly, and then I'll comment. Well, I believe you will agree with me that it is a bit intricate, and especially because of the presence of all these conjunctions here, all the ors, make it really, we start processing the information of the question, and then or it's like a break, we have to accommodate things, and it becomes really complex. So just here, the idea again is that we can identify whether the syntax of a sentence is more complex or less complex. Word concreteness, the idea here is that concrete words are more precise and they leave little room for interpretation. These words are often more familiar and represent common objects or experience of everyday life. If we take now words that are a bit more abstract, for example, the word freedom. When I was doing the presentation, I was even thinking to think of an image to represent an apple. That's simple, right? We go in the internet and we put apple and okay. But what about freedom? So, okay, this may be a good representation of freedom. You know, yes, the bird is getting free. It was in a cage. Yeah, okay, good. But this could also represent freedom. I'm on a road and I have just no destiny. I'm just going, you know, wherever I feel. And this might be another representation of freedom. So we can see that here, when we start having a more subjective, abstract concept, this leads to more processing, thinking, reflecting for us to accommodate that kind of concept in what we're reading. So it's also known that concrete words are easier to understand than more abstract words, and computing this in a text is possible. The fourth category is referential cohesion. And what we have here is that consistent references to text elements mentioned earlier in a sentence help the reader understand the relationships between parts of the text. I'll give you another example. So in these two sentences, we have Maria had always loved painting. She found it to be the perfect way to express her emotions. Well, here the pronoun she refers to Maria in the same way that the pronoun it refers to painting and her refers to Maria. So the pronouns here referring back to elements of the other sentence. This is referential cohesion, and texts that have referential cohesions are considered to be easier than the ones that do not have, because sometimes we have to infer things more, and whether here things are a bit more explicit, these relationships between the sentences are more explicit. And then we have causal cohesion. And Texts with high causal cohesion are easier to understand because they establish clear connections between ideas. And here we're speaking about connections of cause and effect. I'll give you an example. So here in these two sentences, the sun was shining brightly. As a result, the weather became warm. Here, as a result, is a way to make the connection of these two sentences, this causal connection. And again, here, we don't have to infer anything. It's very explicit. The idea is very explicit between the two sentences. Okay, so these are the 5 categories that they speak about in that article. And my question is, are there online tools available to do any sort of computation? To how do we have to do this, by hand? How do we do it? Well, there are some tools available online. This is just the example of one of them. In fact, if you are a programmer, then it's easier to find tools that you can take a set of functions and you can incorporate this set of functions in your own program. But online tools that run cometrics and make it available to everyone are not so common, but this is one that is common. It's kind of old looking, but I'm going to give you an example using this particular tool so that we can understand better how it works, considering all those 5 categories that we have just spoken about. Right, another long text to read, but you can just have a quick look at it. You don't have to read it all. Maybe I will start reading with you this one. The ramifications of climate perturbation pervade contemporary discourse, engendering profound ramifications for global ecosystems and human civilizations alike. The exponential escalation of greenhouse gas emissions, predominantly attributable to industrial activities and vehicles, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to continue, but we can see that this text is really sort of intricate and not really easy to read. Okay, the idea here was, so can we give this text to a tool? And can this tool tell us how complex, how difficult this text is to read? Yeah, so here I gave the tool to, I used that text in this tool, which was this one I was showing you. And it shows us that it has a 1% narrativity level, syntactic simplicity 58%. So it shows all these percentages, which are a bit difficult to interpret, but it also shows us, the tool gives us these textual feedbacks. So it says that the text is low in narrativity, which indicates that it is less story-like, therefore a bit more difficult to understand. It has average syntactic simplicity. So in this particular criteria, it's criterion, it's not specifically difficult or easy. It has also average word concreteness, but it has low referential cohesion. So, and the explanation it gives us here is that because of this, there is less overlap in explicit words and ideas between sentences. So these conceptual gaps require the reader to make more inferences, making the text a little bit more difficult to understand. And it also has low deep cohesion, suggesting a lack of explicit causal relationships when needed by the text. And because of this, it may be more difficult to comprehend for unfamiliar topics. We'll do the same thing with a simpler text. Okay, so I'll read it again, just the first sentence. Climate change is creating serious problems for humans and for our planet. Such a change is caused by the pollution that people produce mainly from factories and cars, which is making the earth warmer. And so it goes, and we can see already that this text is a bit easier to read and understand. And these are, this is the analysis done by the same tool for this particular text. Just having a look here, we can see that these blue bars, they tend to be a bit larger than in the other one. Later, I will compare the two, but let's have a look at the textual feedback that the tool gives us. So the text is low in narrativity, again, so it didn't change in this respect. There was no change. It is high, its high syntactic simplicity means that it has simple sentence structures. Simple syntax is easier to process. I'm sorry that sometimes I'm looking here because in my screen I cannot see exactly what is written sometimes because there is, but let me try to move this here. Okay, now it's better. So it also says that it has high word concreteness, suggesting a low volume of word abstractness and high imageability, thus which makes it easier to understand, and so forth. I'm not going to go through each of them, but I will just show you here visually. We can see that the first text, the one that was on the left, all the blue bars, they are smaller than the other ones. So the bigger the bars, the easier the text is. And this was just computed by this particular tool. So we can see that potentially cometrics using these computational linguistics programs, it can give us an idea of complexity of texts. But here I say, okay, but now we're in 2024, we're not speaking anymore of these metrics. They seem to be a little bit old. How do they fit into a world where there is ChatGPT that can do, can ChatGPT do something like this? So what I did here, I just asked ChatGPT if it could analyze a text in terms of narrativity level, syntactic complexity, word concreteness, referential. These are all the criteria that I presented before. And then it answered, sure, I can help you analyze a text based on the mentioned criteria. Just give me the text. And that's what I did. I showed it the first text, the more complicated one. And here is the answer. So it said that it had low narrativity level. I don't know if you remember, but it was somehow aligned with what was said by Cometrics. In terms of syntactic complexity, it says moderate. Sentences are straightforward and not overly complex. In the other tool, we had an average, so it's not too different from here. Word concreteness, it's moderate to high. In the other tool, it said that it was average. So again, reasonably aligned. Referential cohesion here, it said high. Pronouns and reference are used effectively to link ideas. And there it wasn't, here in these last two, it's not really aligned with what Cometrics said. But we can see that GPT gives us an answer that is aligned in some of these in some of these criteria, but it's interesting for us to see that it's very authoritative in presenting us with an answer, and we just believe it and say, okay, cool, it does a text analysis and it seems to be fine, but we have to take it with a little bit of caution. But we're going to further discuss this in the presentation and in the kind of activity that we're going to propose. Well, but then another thing that comes to mind is that we have different, when you think about language learning, there are these international exams that are widely accepted, like TOEFL, IELTS, Cambridge, or other exams. But the criteria that these exams have are different from these criteria. So, what do we do? If we have a look at IELTS, for example, the criteria that they have is more related to text fulfillment, lexical resources, grammatical range and accuracy, coherence and cohesion. They do have a relationship with the criteria that we were analyzing, but they do not map directly one to the other. So what do we do? Ping is going to give you some ideas later on, but let's see what's being shown in the literature regarding the use of these large language models or generative artificial intelligence models in language teaching and learning. Perhaps here I have to make a parenthesis to comment on generative AI and large language models. When we speak about generative AI, we are not necessarily speaking of a large language model, because we can a generative AI tool can produce images, movies, different media. And when we're speaking about a large language model, then we're talking more of texts. But here they are using the word generative AI, but they are meaning, this subclass of large language models. And in this paper, they just wanted to see how these generative, it's a literature review, and they wanted to see how these generative artificial intelligence models are being used in language learning. And one of the things that they realized is that the most widely studied application of generative AI in language teaching and learning has been its use for writing instruction. So really connected to things that we are talking about here. And they also say that research has demonstrated that generative AI can help learners improve their writing by providing real-time feedback on 5 factors: grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure, word choice, and rephrasing. This is summarizing very briefly. This is one of the most important feedback conclusions they give in the paper. And it can give us sort of an understanding how these feedbacks are constructed to help students in language learning. This is another paper that it is, if you see the date, it's going to be published in June 2024. So it's really fresh. And it speaks about large language models and automated essay scoring of English language learner writing, insights into validity and reliability. So this is interesting, because I was saying that the GPT, I showed the example of the answer that GPT provided in the analysis of that particular text. And I said that, well, it doesn't really align with what we had seen before. And here their question is, how valid and how reliable are the answers? And what they did, they used a particular prompt they used three different systems: Claude, ChatGPT, and Palm 2. So these are three, let's say, equivalent large language models, and they presented this prompt to all of these tools. And the prompt asks the tools to analyze texts considering a particular rubric that they provide in the Appendix A in the article. They show the rubric that they gave the systems. The conclusions that they got was that GPT-4 demonstrated excellent reliability. So the answers provided were really reliable. Claude 2 showed good reliability. Palm 2 and GPT-3 exhibited moderate reliability. And GPT-4 not only was the most reliable in scoring, but the scores that it provided were similar to those of human raters. So this can be interesting for us to see. But there is a little concern, which is large language models on a few occasions assign scores on a continuous scale despite of the rubric being ordinal. What does that mean? It means that they were expecting grades that were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and sometimes the tool gave 4.5. So it gave an unexpected result. The problem here is that we can see that these large language models, they have a non-deterministic behavior. It means that the same input given by someone sometimes can generate an output that is different. This is somehow, it's diverse from what we were used to in computer programming, when I would give the computer an input and the output was always the same. If I do this, the answer is going to be, it was more deterministic. And here we're in a situation where in which it is no longer deterministic, which can be a problem. And sometimes there are these hallucinations, the system behaves in a very different way. And it's very difficult to explain why the system got to a particular answer. So this is something we have to take into account. Here there is another research done about the use of artificial intelligence in automated SE scoring. But as time is going very fast, I think I'm going to pass it to Ping for her to speak a little bit more about the criteria that is used in specific exams and how we can introduce this in the large language models, how we can use them to analyze texts. So.
Okay, can I use your computer?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Eliseo, for his informative presentation. And now I'm going to carry on and to show you some rubrics, and we can try to get familiar with what we're going to do for the workshop. Okay, so let's try to look at the important rubric for ASE automated scoring, this kind of stuff. So first of all, I would like to show you the simple certificate of IELTS, and let's try to look at the test results together. We can see for IELTS, we have listening, reading, writing, speaking, overall band, and CFR level. So the key thing for us to pay much attention to is for the writing. How can we interpret the score? And now I'm going to let you to familiar with the IELTS writing test format together. So the IELTS writing, it has two parts, Task 1 and Task 2. And for Task 1, it aims to assess participants' ability to present and describe visual information logically and coherently, and for academic version, or to convey information in a clear and appropriate tone, that is for general training version. And for Task 2, it aims to assess participants' ability to provide well-structured arguments, opinions, and ideas in written form. And now let's try to look at what participants should do. So for task 1, participants will be shown an image such as a chart, graph, or map. And they will then be asked to a question relating to the image and expected to write around 150 words summarizing what they see. And for task 2, some formats for IELTS academic or general training tests. Same format, and participants will be asked to write an IC in response to a question or a statement of at least 250 words on a topic provided. So according to these kind of simple description, we can see at least we can try to have a kind of assessment criteria like word length or something. And now let's try to look at in a detailed way. So for these rubric, and they provide with a band score. And for IELTS, a band score starting from band 0 to band 9. And for the workshop we're going to mainly focus on these 4 bands, band 4, band 5, band 6, and band 7. So to this kind of thing, it just gives us the overall skill description, and we can see they try to classify category learners into limited user for band 4, modest user for band 5, and competent user for band 6, and good user for band 7. And let's try to look at the key things for us to assess this. We have to pay much attention to language use, and particularly in language. And the rubrics format is very, very simple in that way. So let's try to get familiar with how it is organized. So we have the sub-skills, A, B, C, D. So it's 4 dimensions, and the bands starting from 0 to 9, and then the descriptors. Okay, so let's try to have a overview of this one together. I'm going to give you some time to try to quickly look at the key dimensions here. So we can see task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. It's very complicated, I know. So, because just now Dr. Eliseo has already mentioned this, in the year 2024, we can ask ChatGPT to help us to save time and try to help us to do summarizing. And now I prompt the ChatGPT and feed the ChatGPT with each categories and ask the ChatGPT to help me to summarize. So we can have a look to see whether this summarization is satisfied or not. So the first part, let's try to look at this column as about task achievement. And it summarizes band 4 to band 7. We can see for band 4, the criteria, we can find some key tags: minimal response, difficult to identify position, and repetitive. And the tags we can give: minimal response, unclear position, and repetitive. And band 4, incomplete prompt addressing, limited idea development, some repetition. So the tags we can try to keep in mind is incomplete response, limited ideas, some repetitions. And for band 6, we can see the summarization should be main parts addressed, relevant position, some unclear ideas, and the tag main parts addressed, relevant position, and unclear ideas. And the band 7, on the band 7, sorry, I have to move. It's about appropriately addressed, clear position, supported ideas. And then we can find the ChatGPT give us the summarization of these kind of criteria by focusing about some specific parts. That is for task achievement. And now let's move on to coherence and cohesion. Of course, here that are the full rubric contents for the IELTS. And then I asked the ChatGPT to summarize it for me. So we can see for band 4, on this incoherent, unclear relationships, inaccurate referring. And for band 5, it's some organization, partial cohesion, and repetitive. And band 6 is coherent, clear relationships, mechanical cohesion. And for band 7, this logical organization, flexible cohesion, and minor ellipses. Okay, that is for coherence and cohesion. I think it's not bad for the summarization. And for and for the lexical resource, and we can see it's very detailed for the rubric contents. And I asked the ChatGPT, it's ChatGPT 4.0, I have to say. So we can find the band 4 is limited resource, repetitive vocabulary in appropriate chunks. And band 5 is minimal, adequate, simple vocabulary, frequent lapses, and noticeable errors. Band 6, adequate resource, clear meaning, wider vocabulary, some errors. And band 7, sufficient resource, on some flexibility, less common idiomatic item, awareness of style, and few errors. That is for lexical resource. And then the last one came to grammatical range and accuracy. And of course, it summarizes like band 4, limited structures, repetitive, faculty punctuation. And band 5 for mix of forms, errors in complex, manageable errors. And band 6 is variety of structures, controlled grammar, some errors. And band 7 is flexible use, accurate, and occasional errors. So that is ChatGPT summarization for the rubric contents. By doing this, I think that I have already communicated with ChatGPT 4.0 about these rubrics. And later, I'm going to share you the results. After I communicated ChatGPT 4.0 with these rubrics, and I give ChatGPT 4.0 a sample test provided by the iOS 17, and we're going to see his comments, and we're going to have a discussion about it later. So I think that we're going to move on to the workshop, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent.
Stop the recording.
Yeah. Thank you.